Oh, I tell you what, it's okay to clap in a song. You hear something about the grave empty, it's okay to let out a yahoo. Hallelujah. Puppy, you're going to have to lead them in that, okay? I believe if anybody can do it, you can. Hey, I tell you what, Jimmy, I was uh, listening to some music yesterday. I think you've done this before, House of the Rising Sun to Amazing Grace. You and Jamie need to work that out for us. I mean, it's kind of a slow song, kind of a low song, but um, y'all could sure play that even on a shaken howdy time or something. Peaceful, easy feeling also is to the tune of Amazing Grace. Those would be some fun songs to sing. I could just see Jamie doing that, playing that with his electric guitar there. He'd be really good at that. So, good song, good song. October 1991, a fishing boat was docked in Massachusetts, and it was a late time in the fishing season for that year, and the fishing season had been poor, and they were planning a fishing trip out on that October morning, and little did they know that out off on the North Atlantic there was a perfect storm brewing. There were three lows that were forming, and they were all coming together, and they were forming this massive storm out on the North Atlantic Ocean. But this little fishing boat and the crew of that boat was wanting to make up for some lost profit because the season had been so poor up until that point. So they loaded up their vessel, they loaded up their boat, and they headed out to sea. While they were out there, that perfect storm turned into the Hurricane Gloria. The boat went out to sea that morning and was never heard from again. 2 weeks later, they found little bits and pieces of the boat, but no survivors. A hurricane on the open ocean, they say, is the greatest force known to man. It is more powerful than a tornado. It is more powerful than a nuclear bomb. A hurricane out on the open ocean has enough power in it to supply the United States with electricity for 4 years. A hurricane out on the open ocean takes up 1 million cubic miles of atmosphere. A hurricane on the open ocean, there are not enough weapons in the United States arsenal and Russia arsenal, nuclear arsenal combined to move a hurricane for one single day. Now, the storm we're going to look at today, I'm sure, was nothing quite like the power of a hurricane out on one of these great oceans of this globe. But it was a storm so powerful that it put fear and worry into men who grew up on the Sea of Galilee, who were fishermen who knew what storms looked like. Take your Bible and turn to Mark chapter 6. You remember that Jesus fed the 5,000 last week. And after doing that, he is going to send the disciples away. He's going to send them away in a boat out on the Sea of Galilee. Now, to understand what is taking place here, we need to, why does Jesus send the disciples away? You remember last week the disciples are giving Jesus some ideas of who to send away. And who is he telling Jesus to send away? He's telling Jesus, send the people away. Get rid of them. But Jesus comes in and he's going to, eventually now we see, he's going to send the disciples away. He's going to put them in a boat. He's going to send them out into the Sea of Galilee. So why does he do this? Why does Jesus put the disciples in a boat and launch them out into this sea, into this lake? Well, keep your finger there, but you can turn and read in John chapter 6, verse 15. If we want to understand, Mark does not record this portion of it right here, but John does. He mentions these words. If we want to understand why Jesus is having to send the disciples away, we need to look at the harmony of the Gospels right here and piece this together. So John records the need for the disciples to be dismissed. And here's what John says, chapter 6, verse 15. So Jesus perceived that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king. Now that force, when you read, Jesus perceived they were intending to come and take him by force. What does that force mean? It means a violent action, a violent force, a violent power. It is describing a robbery, how a robbery takes place. It's describing somebody running up. It's describing somebody shoving you violently. It's describing somebody snatching something from you and forcing you to do something with a violent action. So that's what this verse is saying. John describes it perfectly. Jesus, understanding that the crowd sees him and has an idea for Jesus, they are going to force him violently do something. So Jesus sees the disciples and he needs to move them. That picture is describing how the crowd was growing. It's describing what their intentions were. Their intentions were to seize Jesus and to make him king. So just remember that. Keep that in the back of your mind right now, why the disciples need to move. Now back to Mark. Mark chapter 6, verse 45. So knowing what we know from John, Mark 6:45 tells us this. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side of Bethsaida. Now let me ask you this. Did Jesus know that there was going to be a storm on that lake, on the Sea of Galilee? Did Jesus know that that storm was going to be there? Did he know that the disciples would encounter a storm as he pushed them off into that boat? He did, absolutely. Absolutely, Jesus knew. So why? Why does Jesus launch his disciples into a storm? Have you ever thought about that? We're going to see why. We're going to see why you might be in a storm today as well. So sure, he knows that there's going to be a storm on that lake, but he sends them out anyway. Just look at verse 47 and 48. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land, seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them. At about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea, and he intended to pass by them. Now, did you get that picture, Chad, that map? See, these guys, they're moving from Bethsaida. It's in the top right. You see two little rivers coming into it. Bethsaida and Capernaum is where their travel route was, I believe. They were moving in between those two areas right there. So as you can see, the Sea of Galilee right here, those two areas in relationship, they're close. They're not very far away. But these guys are going to end, I believe, I read that they're going to end about 7 miles out into the sea, because that's how violent this storm was. These are guys who are equipped. They're hardy guys. They're strong guys. They man the oars. They can handle the boat. But the wind that comes out gets them way out into the sea. They only had to go a short distance. We go through storms in our lives as well, and we wonder, God, why have you allowed this in my life? Now, if you're all honest, you've thought that and probably have even said it. God, why are you allowing me, my family, this person, why are you allowing this to transpire in our lives? James, he addresses that issue. He says, look, not only are you're going to have trials, yes. You're going to have many trials. They're going to be various, and they're going to be various degrees as well. So the half-brother of Jesus says, yes, you're going to have trials. You're going to have trouble. You're going to have tribulations. You will have storms in your life. It's not if you will have a storm in your life, but when will you have a storm in your life? Now, I can guarantee you, none of you have ever had this happen. When a storm comes in your life, it does not send you a memo the day before or that morning and say, hey, bud, by the way, storm coming today, 4 o'clock, be ready, get your poncho, get your umbrella out, get your galoshes, be ready, be prepared for it, because it's coming. You don't get a memo, do you? You ever had a memo said, I'm coming, storm on the way? But what happens when you have a real storm outside? You turn on News Channel 6, you hope your satellite stays in tune where you're going. That's the worst time. I mean, the satellite goes out right in the middle of the storm, doesn't it? It's terrible. But you're hoping for Jennifer Rukavina, and she comes on the station there, and she'll tell you, hey, there's a storm coming by. They're pretty good with predicting those thunderstorms. They can tell you at 7:33 there's going to be a storm come through the Olive area. You've seen them do that. They forecast that down to the minute right there. They can do that. They can give you a couple of minutes heads up. But the storm in your life, a spiritual storm, a physical storm, outside of a weather event, gives you no warning. There is no warning before a storm comes. Everybody has encountered storms at one point in their life. You may have a storm in relationships. You may have a storm in your marriage. You may have a storm at your job. You may go through a storm with your kids, with your parents. You may even have storms of emotions in your life. You walk in here every Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday. You know, I was thinking about this. You walk in here like a duck. You walk in here like a duck that is gliding effortlessly on the water. Think about that. You watch a duck, or you watch a goose or a swan, or you watch some kind of creature like that out there in the water, and man, they just glide along that water, don't they? And that's the way you come in here for service. You come in here most of the time, for the most part, with a smile on your face. You look happy. You look like everything's going good. And you look just like that duck that's on that water, and he's and she's just gliding across that water as smooth as can be. But you know what's taking place underneath that water? Boy, those little ducks are just kicking those feet just as hard as they can. You too, you're just wearing yourself out. You're just beating. Your heart is just going as 90 to nothing as fast as it can. You're just doing all the work that you can just to try to stay afloat. But yet you have put on this persona. You've put on this face. You've put on this thing on this mask. You have falsely identified that everything is going good for you, and you think, and you're putting on this idea that you're the duck just effortlessly flying across the water right now. When if truth be known about the majority of you, if not all of you right now, if we were able to look under the water of your life right now, your little feet are just kicking the best they can just to try to keep your head above the water. I'll amen it for you. You can't do it. You're afraid to. You're afraid you might admit to a shortcoming or a limitation in your life. And if the person next to you actually knew what kind of situation you were in, you're afraid they would judge you. And if you're going to live in that chain and bondage, then you are going to have a amount of heaping guilt upon you that you need to be removed from. Question is, will you allow it to be removed? Or are you going to live life the way you've always lived it? So you have storms in your life, no matter if you want to admit it or not. Where do these storms come from? These storms can come from Satan. They can come from your stubbornness. They can come from your hard-headedness. Storms can come from sin. And we're going to see right here that storms can come from following Jesus. Verse 45. Jesus knew that there was going to be a storm, but he launches the boat anyway. So why did he do that? Immediately, Jesus made his disciples. That immediately means out of necessity. He forces, he commands. Jesus sent them. Jesus put them into the boat. He immediately sent the disciples into the boat. Why? Because he was protecting them from a greater storm. So if you're wondering, why am I in this storm today? Quite possibly Jesus has sent you into a storm to protect you from a greater one that was looming. There was a greater storm that was looming on the land. So Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, puts them in a boat and sends them out into another storm. They were not strong enough to withstand the storm that was coming on this land. And we're going to look at that. So immediately he puts the disciples in the boat. See, they had been thinking, we did what Jesus said. We did what he requested, what he instructed, what he commanded us to do. And now we're in a storm. Where is he? Maybe that's you. Maybe you've done what Jesus has asked and you're wondering, where is Jesus? Because I have been following as close as I can to him, but I'm in a storm today and I'm wondering where he is in my life. Because I sure don't feel him, I sure don't sense him. You see, when you're in that position right there, when you're wondering where Jesus is in your life because you're in a storm or you're in some kind of predicament, you're in some kind of circumstance, you know who loves to walk in and whisper in your ear? Satan does. When you're asking the question, where is Jesus? Satan is going to come in and he is going to whisper in your ear, hey, I thought that you said when you became a Christian, everything would be good. He also likes to come in when you're having trouble making that payment. Satan likes to come in and he likes to whisper in your ear, well, I thought Jesus was going to take care of all this stuff. When you're having trouble and you'd like to wring the neck of your son, or you're having trouble with your job and you're worried about that, Satan walks in and he says, I thought when you started to follow Jesus that everything would be fine in your life. So see, we have these storms and we're asking, where is Jesus in my storm? See, the disciples had already been out on this same sea and they had already experienced a storm before, but do you know who was with them in that first storm? Jesus was. Just a few pages back, Mark chapter 4, verse 37 through 39. Jesus was in the boat this time when they were on the storm. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. But where are they at this day? They're in another storm, same lake, same sea, same situation, but who is not with them? Jesus is not physically in the boat with them this time. And they're worried. They are rowing, they are paddling, they are doing all they can, and Satan comes in to your life when you are paddling, when you are rowing, when you are trying to get your sails up, when you are trying to get your boat in the right position. Satan comes in the rough times and he says, where is Jesus now? Where's Jesus for you in your life? I thought he was always going to be here for you. Back to John. Sometimes we get launched into storms and it's for our own protection. John chapter 6, verse 13 and 14. This is the feeding of the 5,000. This is why you need to remember verse 15. They were gathering up the leftovers. They filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. Therefore, when the people saw the sign which he had performed, they said, "This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world." The 5,000 have just eaten. They've had more to eat than ever before. They're full. And what do they say? Surely, they have seen a miracle. They've seen enough miracles now. They say, surely, this is the one. You remember those Old Testament scriptures? You remember what the Old Testament prophet said? Surely, this is the Messiah. Surely, this is the one who is going to save us. He will be our military savior. He will be the one who can bring us out of bondage from Rome. Look at what he has been doing. These Jews hated Rome. Rome hated the Jews. They were looking for somebody to come in, and here we see they have seen Jesus multiply the food. They want to take him by force and make him king. They want him to come in as this conquering hero. So Jesus sees this. Jesus sees this, and he knows the disciples are not strong enough in their faith yet to withstand this mob that is forming. How many men did Jesus feed that day? 5,000. 5,000 on this particular day. They have eaten more than ever before. Their bellies are full more than ever before. And I bet, just seeing this miracle, they think they can take the world with this guy. A Roman legion consists of up to 6,000 men. That's if their ranks aren't depleted. That's if everybody is together and moving in formation. You can imagine that these 5,000 men sitting out there on those mountains watching these miracles take place, hearing Jesus speak, bellies full, they're ready to go. They look around and say, look, there is nearly a legion of us out here. We can take our city back. Jesus, perceiving that they were going to take him by force. Now, what were the disciples always doing? What is one of the first things we see the disciples doing? Even one of the disciples' moms get involved in this, I believe. What is the last thing we see the disciples doing and talking about, even in the upper room, just hours before Jesus is going to die? Remember? Hey, bud, hey. Where's my seat? Where do I fit in this? Where's my position? Can I be your right-hand guy? Can I be your left-hand guy? Can I have the seat of prominence? The disciples, from the beginning to the end, are arguing about who is going to have what place in the kingdom. And now there is nearly a legion of 5,000 men, and these guys are ready to storm against Rome. At least for Jerusalem, at least for their city. These disciples are weak in their faith at this point. If Jesus was to have left them on land right there and that storm that was brewing, can you not see how they would have been so enticed by that uprising that they would have joined in? They would have. They would have joined in to the mob. They would have joined into the uprising because they were all concerned about their position and what their place of prominence would be. So Jesus puts them in the boat and He sends them out into a storm to protect them from the storm that was on land. Maybe you're in a storm today. Quite possibly it might be a protection from God from another storm that you might have went through. Maybe you've thought about that. Maybe you haven't. Maybe Jesus has put you in a storm today because it's safer in that area, that place, than where you on your own ability were headed. What happens in times of storms? In times of storms, it gives opportunity for faith to grow. It gives opportunity for us to get stronger in our faith. It gives opportunity for us to mature in our walk. Used to have a guy I was teaching a Sunday school class for quite some time, and there was an older, wiser, mature gentleman in there, and he would often stay. We like living in the mountaintops, right? We like living on the peaks. I'm closer to God. I'm on the peak right now. How you doing, bud? I'm on a mountaintop right now. That's great. But his analogy was, his theory was, what do you see on the mountaintop? Nothing. Where's the growth? The growth is in the valley. That's true. Our faith grows in the valley. Our faith grows in the storm. We mature in the storms of life. What storm have you been through? Is it a storm of divorce? Storm of accusations against you? Storm of accusations against your character? Have you been attacked in some way? Have you had a storm of school or with a teacher? Have you had a storm of other classmates? What storms have you gone through in your life? Who has attacked you? Who has attacked your character? Who has gone up against you to injure you? Have you learned from it? Have you grown from it? Are you more equipped for it the next time it comes around? Can you identify the next storm before it starts just a little bit earlier, and you're more equipped, you're more better prepared to face that storm? Well, I would suspect you probably are. They always say, I've been to the Smoky Mountains, but I don't know that it's true for them. But I see pictures of the Rocky Mountains, and there's a tree line. And nothing grows above that tree line. Matter of fact, I see pictures of Breckenridge. They've already had snow. A couple of weeks ago, they were already having snow above the tree line. Down below the tree line, it's lush green. In the actual city, it's green. It kind of still looks like springtime or summertime for them, a perfect climate maybe right now. But we think we want to live in the peak, but there's nothing up there. The growth happens in the journey. You say, well, I'm in this storm right now, and that storm offers the opportunity for you to grow. You can trust Jesus in the calm, sunny days, and you can trust Him in the dark, stormy nights as well. Now, maybe you feel like Jesus isn't in your boat this morning. Where is He? I'm in this boat. I'm paddling. I truly am that duck on the water. Yeah, I walked in here with this face on. I walked in here with this mask on. I pretended to be virtuous. I pretended to be this person that I'm not. And yes, Todd, if you really could see me, I am that duck, and my feet are just kicking as hard as it can right now just to get me from point A to point B, and I don't know how I'm going to pay that bill that's coming Friday. I don't know what I'm going to do for it. I'm in this relationship right now, and we're struggling, and we're doing the best we can, and we're just trying to do it on our own ability, at our own hands, on our own, what we're equipped with, and we're just struggling. We're in a storm right now, and we're in this boat, and we're asking ourselves, where is Jesus in our time of need? Because I just don't see Him. Well, you're going to have to come back for next week, because Jesus is in a position. You can just go ahead and read ahead. That'd be your homework. You go ahead and see where Jesus is What is his position when his disciples are out in that storm? What is his position? What is he doing? Where are his eyes? Look to see where his eyes are. I'm going to ask you to bow your head. You need to understand where his eyes are when you're in that storm. When you're wondering how you're going to make ends meet. When you're wondering how things are going to work out, how things are going to come together. You know, every head bowed right now. Eyes closed. Last week I asked you, is there a limitation in your life? We looked at those limitations. Today we're looking at storms of life. We're looking at protection, the need for protection from those storms. Now last week I asked you, I said if you were to be honest, is there a limitation in your life that you need to place in the hands of the one who can multiply your needs? I asked you to raise your hand, and some of you did. Several of you raised your hand. With every head bowed, once again, and eyes closed, I just want to pray for you. I want to get a mental picture of who's out there, of who says, I really am that duck. I do put on a good show for everybody. I put on a good show for friends, for the family. But really, if I'm honest about it, I am struggling. I'm just rowing as hard as I can. I want to ask you one more time, by a show of hands,